I'm Arthel Neville. Time now for Sunday House Call.
And I'm Eric Shawn. Welcome. Joining us as always, Dr. David Samadi, Chairman and Professor of Urology at Lenox Hill Hospital, where he's also Chief of Robotic Surgery there.
And Dr. Mark Siegel, Professor of Medicine at NYU's Langone Medical Center, also author of The Inner Pulse, Unlocking the Secret Code of Sickness and Health. Good to see both of you.
Nice to see you.
Hello, good to see you.
As always. You had a good week?
Yes, you know, I want to talk about this. We have this major news story. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention now under serious fire following a major mishap in 3 of its facilities after 80 workers were reportedly exposed to anthrax. Dr. Samadi, I start with you. First of all, how much more do you know about this, and how does something like this happen?
It's a shocking news, and CDC announced this week that on June 13th, a mishap happened, which should have never happened, because this is a very sophisticated lab in Atlanta. They deal with Ebola, they deal with smallpox, they deal with anthrax. So they have a lot of protocol, and unfortunately the protocol failed this time, and this is what happened. One big lab sent a live anthrax to another lab. They thought it was dead, but they found out a few days after that it was live, and then a lot of people were exposed to this. They are all being treated. Nobody is getting sick at this point, but as we know from anthrax, it can take about up to 2 months or 60 days before the symptoms would start. You would ask what are exactly people should be looking for. If they have a cutaneous anthrax, they would see some painless ulcers and lesions, but more importantly, since it became aerosolized, if you inhale, then you can get fever, chills, short of breath, all of that stuff. The big thing, Arthel, the concern that you may have is it cannot be transmitted from one person to another person. If somebody has it, I would not be able to get it because it has to be in the air, not contagious like that. But it's a lethal, very dangerous. They're being treated, and we'll wait to see what happens with this.
And those are very important points you raised, Dr. Samadi, of course. And Dr. Siegel, I ask you, though, because we don't want to alarm everybody. 80 is a lot of people. That's a large number, but it's not like it's going to be spreading across the city of Atlanta or something, right?
No, and Arthel, as David just mentioned, and I wrote about this in my book, False Alarm, after the 2001 anthrax mailings, that the biggest problem is fear here, because anthrax is not contagious. It cannot spread beyond the people that were already exposed. Now, the problem is the CDC has a bioterror rapid response unit. That's where this was. And basically, they're trying to figure out what would happen if, God forbid, there is another terrorist attack. How do we defend ourselves? So they're studying anthrax. They have it in a spore form, most likely, and they wear respiratory defenses, and everybody gets vaccinated in that level 3 lab. They're protected. But instead of just keeping it there, they decided, let's try killing it with chemicals, and then if it's dead, we can send it to another lab that's got less of that lung protection.
Respiratory.
But this was the first time they ever tried that chemical out. They should never have let it out to another lab.
So is that what happened? The chemical didn't work?
Didn't
work. Kill it?
Didn't work. They know radiation will kill it, but this chemical didn't work. It was still growing. Now, we have a statement from the CDC on what they have to say about it.
Eric, why don't you tell us?
Yeah, the CDC responding to this. This is the statement, quote, "Why this happened is a million-dollar question. We are getting to the bottom of this. These incidents," the CDC says, "can happen. The safety of our employees is priority 1, and once this incident was realized, we moved swiftly to protect our workers." You know, Mark, you mentioned the 2001 incidents happened right after 9/11. They basically were unsolved, I imagine. There was a woman, a hospital worker in New York, died. They thought maybe she got it from mailing or from the subway or something.
And Eric, that's exactly what the level 2 lab does, and why they have. It's important once they kill the anthrax, because they're trying to figure out a way how to identify anthrax. If you get a white powder in an envelope, how do you know if that's anthrax? Well, that's what the level 2 lab is trying to figure out, so that public health authorities can look immediately, quickly, and say, hey, that's not anthrax, don't worry about it.
So that chemical didn't work.
It did work for 24 hours. It did work for 24 hours. Just to give credit to CDC, it wasn't completely a huge mistake. It worked for 24 hours. They cleaned up everything, and then one of those ended up in the incubator a week after they found out, wait a second, like any science that we found accidents like penicillin, the way it was discovered, they find out that now there's live and it actually grew. So they are making progress using chemicals to kill anthrax as opposed to radiation. But, you know, now they're going to be treated with Cipro or doxycycline. And one of the questions
comes up, those
are the antibiotics. They have to take it for about 2 months. The public should not be panicking. You should not go out there and get piles of like these Cipros and antibiotics. There's no threat out there. They're treating everybody with vaccine. There is a vaccine for this.
What about their families that they're in touch
they're
with?
Not,
They
again,
can't, it's not
there's no transmission between person to person. So nobody should worry. For U.S. Army, for these people that are in the lab, they can get a vaccine, 6 of them, in about 18 months, and they can prevent from getting anthrax. Now that they have it, they probably will give them a boost of 3 vaccines over the next few months in order to control this. But you're right, it's a very lethal bioterror drug. It killed about 5 people in 2001, and we just have to wait and see what happens.
The key here is the issue of aerosolizing it, because what they do is they make it so that it can fly through the air. It's in a spore form, which is less likely to infect anyone. So of those 84 people, very unlikely anyone's going to get sick here, especially since they're on antibiotics. But if they got sick, the kind that you get in your lungs is by far the worst. It kills about 94%
Bottom line,
of people.
it's contained. They have it under control.
Absolutely.
Nothing to panic.
Nothing to
And
be
spore
worried about.
form, what Mark is talking about, spore, is that the bacteria that has a shell around it, and that's why it's hard to really
stay in the
contaminate.
environment for a long time. Stays there for a long time.
They're on top of it.
That's good.
Yeah.
Okay.